Okay, it's 5:15 p.m. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. This is the February 10th, 2022 meeting of Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Dale Vaughn. I'm the chair and of the commission. I'd like to remind everybody to turn on their microphones when speaking, and ask everyone to please silence their phones and other electronics. We'll start off by letting the members introduce themselves, starting with the council liaison.
Mike Lester, City Council Liaison.
Candace Bohr.
Emily Fretwell.
Jack Deacon.
Penny Quigg.
Blake Marcus.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Dean Dutoy.
Shannon Hawk.
Courtney Bliss, City Planner.
Eric Barron, Planning Manager.
Sonny Sanders, Director of Planning Protective Services.
Shane Wade, City Staff.
Dustin Birch, Associate City Attorney.
Beth Sweeten, City Staff.
Okay, we'll move on. The city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of regular members. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. I declare a quorum is present. The following regular members are absent this evening: Gregory Butler, Spencer Hochfeld, and Trika Young. Are there any members who disqualify themselves from voting on the agenda item?
I will be disqualified from case number P22003 and P22004 for conflict.
Okay, thank you. That was Blake Marcus, by the way. The voting members are as follows: Emily Fretwell. It was spelled wrong here. Emily Fretwell, Jack Deacon, Dean Dutoy, Bunny Tricky Cotton, Penny Quigg. Blake Marcus will be voting on the first case. Then Shannon Hawk, Candace Moore. Okay. The cases, we have 3 cases in front of us tonight. The first one is the 2400 block of Industrial Drive rezoning from M2 to C2 in final subdivision plat. Second one is 818 Montana Street, small wireless facility right-of-way special exception permit. And the third is 917 Jackson Street, small wireless facility right-of-way special exception permit. Are there any requests for continuance on any of the cases? Okay,
No.
seeing none. None. Are there any requests to reorder the agenda? No? Okay. Courtney, would you please read the format of the hearing and order of testimony?
Okay. I'd like to briefly describe the procedures of the commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so please step to the microphone when you speak and give your name and address for the record. The standard order of each case is as follows. After introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant or their consultant shall provide information on the request. Opening testimony shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant shall have an additional 3 minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then make the recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, all references to print materials, including staff reports and applicable findings, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will close testimony from the floor. The commission will then discuss a proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form motion shall be positive. That is, that the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented, or with conditions, stipulations, or modifications. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chair shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following items are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the comprehensive plan and land use map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and/or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Planning and Zoning or the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection to the Department of Planning and Protective Services or to the Office of the City Clerk. Please be advised that these items are public record, and any items that are received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and/or letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Courtney. Okay, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as printed or ordered?
Move to adopt the agenda as printed.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. I'm assuming everybody had a moment to look at the minutes, so I'd like to get a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of December 9th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. I do believe we have received some communications from an individual regarding the two cases. Excuse me.
I think it's just the Jackson Street case.
The Jackson Street case. So
So,
the first case won't be affected by that, and it looks like we have that resolved with this person. We're going to move on to the case number P22002, 2400 block of Industrial Drive, rezoning from M2 to C2 in final subdivision plat. And we'll ask Courtney to present the case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this case revolves around both a final subdivision plat and a rezoning from the current zoning that it holds, which is an M2 general industrial, to a C2 general commercial. So that is a location and zoning map of the current property as it stands and the current zoning that it has. It is all M2 right now, and then to the north is residential, to the south is M2 general industrial. It has some industrial and commercial to the west, and then also some industrial as well as commercial to the east. And the little black outline outlines the entirety of that property under consideration for this case. That is, this next slide is the proposed rezoning as it was presented in the initial application for the rezoning of 5 to 1 acres of, it would include in this. So lot 1 would be to the farthest to the west, which would include that top portion of that building, but below that it will not include that back portion of the building. And a part of that reason is because there are currently 3 auto-oriented businesses that encompass the majority of that building, and then there would be a proposed bar in the top portion of that building, which would be is suggested to be a C2, which would better cater to that, and then the rest of the other lots would all fall under that C2 designation. So that is a copy of the proposed subdivision plat, which the largest lot would be lot number 2 at the initial proposal, it would have been 2.69 acres, and then the smallest would have been lot 4 at 0.91 acres. And the majority of where lot 2 and lot 3 stems from is the division of that central lot to encompass the western half of that central lot plus the southeast corner of that, and then that little portion up there in the center of that central lot, the northeast corner of that would be lot 3. The other ones relatively stay the same in shape. They do shift lines a little bit. However, today we did receive a, let's see. Yeah, okay. We did receive a revised both lot change, which would affect the rezoning. So it's just a slight shifting of that line between 1 and 2 to the west. So that lot 2 would increase in a little bit, and then of course lot 1 would decrease. So the C2 zoning that was proposed would increase a little bit, and then of course the spot that would remain M2 would decrease some. So as far as the rezoning, yes, correct. Yeah. The current uses, and a lot of them are actually grandfathered in. Is C2, yes. Some of the uses would be, so in lot 2, they're gonna have the new Mel's building and then lot 3 would have a proposed laundromat. Lot 4, there wasn't anything proposed. There was an office or a little, an existing building, but I don't think there's anything in there. The auto-oriented one, yeah. Yeah, it's approved towing.
If I may. Is
Lot 1, is that, there's a hash mark across it, is it dividing that lot, part commercial and part industrial? Just on the map we have. Now you can see if there's, well, it's split between the cafe probably and the picture shops.
Yes, right between, I think the buildings are either connected or very, very close together. And so, that's correct. Yep, so it's a little odd, but.
And one more question. Lot number 4, is the farmer bearing distributor? Or that was a distributor
3.
of some sort?
I think it was Towner Communications was in 4.
Well, and then right next to it was the greenhouse, then Pop's building.
Yep.
And then Melville.
Oh, okay. Is that all? Yeah, I had so I was gonna just cover this real quick. The rezoning, it seems a bit odd the way that it works, but it does correspond with the adopted comprehensive plan. And as you see up there, in that property is highlighted by a black outline, and it does fit within that corner, that commercially designated placement or zoning that was a part of the future land use map of the comprehensive plan. So it does align with that. Let's see, and then okay, yep, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do any other commissioners have any questions for Courtney? Okay, we'll move on to with someone who would like to present the case. Please speak your name and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Paul Sampson with Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. And I am here tonight to represent Brian Mawson, who is the property owner. He's also the owner of Mel's Cafe. He recently acquired the Mel's Cafe property and properties to the east of that, which include the former location of the Pop's Lawn and Garden, the greenhouse, and then on the very far east end of his property is IBT, which is a industrial equipment supplier. Before the meeting, I handed out a couple of exhibits for you. The one that's got the aerial photography behind it, that's the kind of the concept site plan of the intended uses of the property. And then the back one is just a larger blow-up view of the preliminary, or of the final subdivision plat. Mr. Mawson's intent with the property is to basically redevelop the majority of the buildings on the site. Primarily would be the construction of a new Mel's Cafe which would be located on the western part of the Pops property where the office building used to be. To the east of that, the long, skinny building is a shop and warehouse type uses, and the where the existing greenhouse is at, that will be demolished, and then he has got a contract for purchase for somebody who intends to put a dry cleaner on that facility. The industrial equipment supplier on the far east end will remain as is, but the subdivision plat will create a separate tract for that property. The existing Mel's will be renovated into a nightclub bar establishment, and then the south half of that building currently has a towing operation, vehicle repair shop, and it's got some outdoor vehicle storage associated with that, and that's the reason that the south half of that lot isn't planned to remain as industrial zoning rather than the commercial zoning. In order to make all these things happen, two things have got to get approved. Number one is the rezoning. As Courtney explained, most of the proposed redevelopment uses are not permitted within a manufacturing zoning district. Bars and restaurants and contractor shops and even retail shops are not permitted within an industrial zoning district. So that's the reason that we're asking for the rezoning of that. And like I said, the tow company on the backside of the existing Mel's, because of the outdoor vehicle storage, does need that industrial zoning to remain. The other issue with the industrial zoning and the reason that the comprehensive plan, as shown on the map, calls that out as commercial is really that the size of the property isn't conducive to industrial uses. So we think what Mr. Mawson has got proposed is a good fit for the area. We'll redevelop a property that's been sitting vacant and deteriorating for quite some time. The second part of the development plan would take the property and split it into 4 separate lots. Right now, if you were to look at the tax map, I think it's 2 separate properties. So we're basically going to take the 2 properties and split them into 4 lots. Lot 1 will be the old Mel's / tow company. Lot 2 will have the new Mel's and the warehouse storage contractor shop. Lot 3 would be where the existing greenhouse is. That will be the dry cleaners. And then, like I said, Lot 4 will be the equipment supplier, and that'll basically remain as is. With the subdivision plat and in order to prepare all these lots to be developed, some infrastructure improvements need to be put in. We've submitted a plan to the city for a sanitary sewer extension. Right now, the sanitary sewer stops in the backside of the Mel's property. All the rest of the buildings along that section are tied into the sewer, but they're all through private, small diameter sanitary sewer laterals. So in order to make sure each lot has access to a public sewer main, we've have a sanitary sewer extension designed through the subdivision that'll accommodate that. We also was mentioned in the city's staff report some other infrastructure improvements that'll be needed, primarily fire hydrants. We've been talking with Missouri American. They recently constructed a new water main along Industrial Drive, and for some reason, and I'm not sure how, no fire hydrants were installed as part of that. So we still have the details to be worked out on that, but I have no doubt that the fire department's going to require fire hydrants. We just don't believe it's Mr. Mawson's responsibility to build those, as the utility company just did a bunch of work to do that. So that's something we'll be working with the water company and city staff on. The other piece of required infrastructure due to the subdivision plat is sidewalks along Industrial Drive. Sidewalks are normally required for any new developments. However, in this case, Industrial Drive does not have curb and gutter. There's just shoulders or asphalt shoulders along the edge of the road, and the city does have a mechanism for requesting sidewalk deferrals in situations such as that. We have submitted a sidewalk deferral application. We just did that earlier this week, so we haven't gotten any feedback from the city as to whether or not that'll be approved or not, but we sure hope it would, and just because of the nature of the existing road, and if Industrial Drive were ever to be improved, the likelihood of any sidewalk constructed now working with a new road is slim to none in our opinion, so we hope that deferral will be approved. Once the subdivision and the rezoning are complete, that will allow Mr. Mawson to proceed with the redevelopment. So we will also be submitting site plans on each individual lot for any construction that will be done on those. And with that, we'll also be reconfiguring some of the driveways along Industrial Drive. Right now, some of the driveways are very wide and oftentimes combined into 100 or 150 foot wide long driveways. So those will be reconfigured in order to meet current city standards. We'll be extending utilities into the individual properties and dealing with any stormwater or other development issues. But like I said, those will all be dealt with on a lot by lot basis as site plans are submitted. So that's the long and the short of the proposal. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm assuming, curb and gutter is what the entrance will be then, because there's really no curb and gutter there.
There's no curb and gutter on Industrial at all. So yeah, we'll bring curb and gutter for the parking lots, and then once we get up to where the radiuses are for the entrances, the curb and gutter will just kind of die off, and then we'll tie the new pavements into the existing road.
Go ahead, Jack.
I assume this has always been under conditional use, because it's been operating there as retail. I know Pops was there 50 years ago, probably. Grandfathered in?
Yeah, so there's a fair portion of Industrial Drive was used commercially back when the zoning code was arranged in a pyramid structure. In 2002, it was rewritten into a different format, and that's when a lot of those uses became non-conforming or grandfathered commercial uses in an industrial zoning district.
And my second question, how many parking lot planters are required, or are there any on this project?
There is a requirement in the city's zoning code that deals with parking lot shading. If I remember, it's for a parking lot, 35% of the parking lot area has to have some sort of tree cover. So part of the site plan process that we go through is a planting plan and shading calculation. And typically we look at the mature size of a tree. So if you're going to plant a maple tree or an oak tree, you might get 40 feet diameter, and then we actually calculate, well, how many square feet does that cover, and gives you a size of how many trees you need versus how much shade is required to be.
Is that a city requirement, or is that a federal requirement, or is that just
That's
a beautification requirement
city zoning code.
coming from?
Yeah, so there's the parking lot landscaping requirement within the zoning code. Paul described it very well, has a percentage requirement. In practice, it comes out to about 1 tree for every 10 parking spots. But the percentage requirement basically forces the trees to be spread about the parking lot and in the interior of it rather than lined up around the side.
And the reason for this?
It's aesthetics, largely.
Is there a way to circumvent that? Because it's a lot of expense, and then we're so picky about so many parking spaces for so many places, and then we take up parking spaces. I'm just wondering if there's some kind of procedure to exempt some of these. It's a big enough expense to come in under code with new construction, old construction, but if we could somehow just do away with some of the old beautification projects, to me, were we're nice on paper, but, what's the old saying? Don't let good intentions make bad policy.
I understand where you're coming from, Jack, but I feel like it's a necessity too, though, because if you look at the Walmart on Stadium compared to the Walmart on the east side, there's a huge difference in the aesthetic of it. You know what I mean? So I do think plants and that type of thing are needed. That's just my opinion. But any other questions for Paul?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of this request? Okay, no. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone else who would just like to speak on this request in general? Seeing none. Okay. We will now close the testimony, and Courtney will give us a staff report.
I'll first pass it to Shane.
Oh.
I think Paul did a real good job of covering most of the infrastructure for what Public Works reviews. Just a brief synopsis of what we looked over. As far as stormwater goes, as Paul had indicated, we'll look at that as far as on an individual basis when the lots develop, since there is existing paving and existing buildings. Then depending on what that if there's any additional impervious area that's created, we may need to look at either stormwater quality or stormwater detention if that increases. But if not, then there wouldn't be a requirement then in terms of the stormwater quality aspect of it. Existing drainage issues do exist on the property to the south, so we'll need to be cognizant of that when those site plans come in for review. As far as sanitary sewer, as Paul indicated, a main is being proposed to serve all 4 of the lots of the subdivision. And as he had also indicated, sidewalk deferral has been received to address the sidewalk along Industrial Drive. Street lights do exist along Industrial Drive on the south side along the roadway on existing utility poles. A new utility easement is being proposed to be dedicated along Industrial Drive along the frontage of all 4 of the lots. Fire hydrants, as Paul had indicated, will be needed as well. I think that should cover most everything. He also mentioned about the driveways and how that would be improved as far as access to and from Industrial Drive. Both the improvement plans and the plat has been reviewed and are in generally good order. We've sent the technical comments back to this consultant for consideration, and as far as engineering staff, we would recommend approval subject to technical corrections being addressed prior to consideration by the City Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know we've talked about sidewalk deferral before, but that is a staff decision, it didn't come back in front of us, correct?
And so I can describe that. It is a bit of a complex thing. And so developments in general will trigger sidewalk construction requirements. So the city has that within the city code, that development related trigger, and also minor subdivision plats will trigger sidewalk construction as well as major subdivision plats. There is an option for a property owner to apply for a deferral from this requirement. It's not a variance, it's a deferral, basically saying that there's a list of criteria. If the property meets that criteria, that instead of constructing sidewalk today, sidewalk would be constructed at some future date. One way to describe it is when it makes more sense. If there's a sidewalk project or something going down the street, then the concept here is that then the deferrals could be called in as well. and perhaps making some connections there in order to pursue the sidewalking of an entire corridor or something similar. And that's just a concept. But it is an administrative function, so it's an application process reviewed at the city staff level, ultimately at the department director level. The department director of planning and protective services would review it, either approve or deny, and notify the property owner. If approved, we actually record a document so that any future property owners, would be on notice, so to speak, that there's this outstanding sidewalk construction requirement that they need to be aware of. And so I hope that's a fair overview of that process. It should not affect your deliberations here. There is a sidewalk construction requirement, and they do have the right and to apply for a deferral and have done so.
Do any commissioners have any questions for staff? Okay. Seeing none, who would like to make the motion? A motion?
Wait, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Courtney's report.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so with respect to the planning side of it, this proposal does, under the analysis of this proposal with respect to the code, especially portions such as the zoning code chapter 35 and then the subdivision code chapter 33, and looking at sections or articles like Article 5, which describes density and dimensional standards, this proposal has been in compliance with those such ordinances, regulations, and etc. Under the analysis, which is in the staff report that's included in the packet, there's a little graph which goes through such things such as, will this proposal be a benefit? Will it cause any harm to the community or surrounding adjacent property owners? Will it allow the property owner to better use their property? Yes. So all of those things have been found to be in the yes category, except for one, which is that this would not be an expansion of an existing zone. It would be a creation of a new portion of that C2 general commercial. But as pointed out, it does comply with the comprehensive plan, and it also is very close to other commercial spots there, including like a CO commercial office and the C2. So with respect to all of those things, staff recommends approval with the condition that it has to be in compliance with any sort of corrections or technical comments from staff. But we do recommend approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, in my opinion, I think anything's better than what it is now, so I'm glad to see something happening there, for sure.
So very briefly up on the screen is the two recommended forms of motion. We did have to edit them for two reasons. One thing, we want to start making sure that is very clear, not only to the membership, but also to anyone in attendance, that what the Planning and Zoning Commission is doing is recommending items for approval to the City Council. And in the past, I think it's sometimes been inferred that the Planning and Zoning Commission might be an approval authority approving something. And so I'll give you an example, and discovered this after backtracking, that recently the Sam's Club building was painted. What they proposed within an amended special exception permit. Well, backtracking, looking at some of the language, they had inferred that they had been approved, even though we had specifically told them this is continuing on to the City Council for final approval. And so that's what happened. And so we're going to make an effort to try to make sure that it's very clear that what this body is making recommendations to the City Council. There's a few exceptions to that. Preliminary plats and a couple other things, but we'll stay on top of that and make sure that the correct motions and language are getting in front of you, at least as the recommendation goes. For this specific case, there's two up on the screen. We also had to edit the acreages because of the slight movement of a line, the information we received today. But those are the two recommended forms of motion, first for the rezoning, then for the subdivision plat. You'll note the two recommended conditions on the subdivision plat. First, compliance with technical corrections. That's common, just as Mr. Wade had pointed out. We've already supplied those to the engineer. and believe there's no issues with them. He's nodding his head no. And then the second one is submittal of a signed plat document prior to us introducing it to the city council. We must have that signed document to go to the city council, and we won't introduce it to them until we have it. Be happy either Courtney or I can answer any questions.
Do any commissioners have any questions for city staff? Okay, we'll move on to the motion. Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move for recommendation for approval to the city council of the request to rezone the property consisting of 5.27 acres from M2 General Industrial to C2 General Commercial.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? No? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. All right. Courtney, will this proceeding will go on to the city council?
Second motion.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
What? Oh, sorry. There's two motions. My bad.
I'll move for recommendation for approval to the city council of the final subdivision plat of Mel's Cafe subdivision, subject to the following conditions: compliance with the comments and technical corrections of the planning and engineering divisions, and second, submittal of a signed plat document prior to introduction to the city council.
I'll second.
Okay. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That motion carries as well. Okay. Now on to the city council. What's the date on that?
Okay, so up on the screen, it'll go for an introduction on March 7th, and then it'll go for a public hearing and vote on March 21st in this room at 6:15. 6, sorry. Okay.
Are you excusing yourself? Okay, thank you. We're moving on to the next case, P22003-818 Montana Street.
First, before we proceed to those two next cases, and the next two cases on the agenda are very similar, different locations, but they are new, and so I wanted to give a bit of an overview, try to describe what these things are that are appearing in front of you, and so they're called small cellular facilities. They're becoming increasingly common. The technology has really advanced to the level that cell towers are becoming less. Well, for two reasons. You know, good portions of the nation and our city have been covered by the existing network of cellular towers, but these small cell towers are a little bit more capable of targeting specific areas. As I understand it, and I'm not very tech savvy, but it's basically relying on, the 5G, 5th generation type technology, if I've got all my G's correct. But as you can see up on the screen, what they basically look like. And so this is a particular tower located in our city at the intersection of Chestnut and Leslie. And I give thanks. Actually, the photo credit is there on the screen. Councilman Lester took this picture. I had taken some pictures earlier, or I think the evening before, Mr. Lester, and but the lighting was not right on it, and this one was much better. So we definitely used this as a good example. So it basically looks like a utility pole with a small canister, about a 3-foot tall canister at the top of the pole, and that's where the cellular array is housed. And then about halfway up the pole there, you'll see an equipment box where some of the functioning equipment for the small cell array is located. And then oftentimes at the ground level, or flush with the ground in a compartment underneath the ground, you'll have what's called a hand hole, where there's a connection, such as to a fiber optic line, in order to actually get the signal. And then also an electric connection. It does have to have a separate electric connection. So oftentimes, well, I'll back up here just a little. Cellular facilities are very highly regulated by state and federal law. In fact, we regularly update our zoning code requirements with respect to telecommunication facilities in response to changes at the state or federal level. The last update was done in 2019. And so many of you were sitting on this commission and heard and voted on that particular request. And that was done in response to the state legislature passing a bill that gave some pretty broad authority for placement of these types of facilities within right-of-way. But that bill also gave a very narrow window for cities to adopt regulations specifically for historic areas and single-family residential neighborhoods. And so the city staff quickly put together a proposal to take advantage of that window and put that in front of first the Planning and Zoning Commission. It is adopted by the City Council and is in our code. And so what we did was we basically used the existing special exception permit process within the zoning code and applied it to towers such as these located within those areas of single-family residential areas or historic areas. And so I'll try to give an example on how how we treat how the city code, how the zoning code treats towers such as these. They are permitted by right in all of the non-single family, non-historic zoning districts. So cellular companies can erect these towers within the right-of-way as a matter of right. They still have to receive a permit. We call it a small cell right-of-way permit, but it is something they can do. Within the single-family districts, they are permitted if they're being located on an existing utility pole. So if they come into a neighborhood where there's an existing pole, they can attach this array onto that pole. And it usually involves a swap out of the pole. So when I say an existing pole, they can pull it out and replace it with one for structural reasons, for example. And they can even increase the height of the pole by up to either 10 feet or 50 feet total in height. And some of those things are, again, items that are protected within the state or federal law. But if they're locating it on a new pole in a single-family residential zone, then it triggers a special exception permit process, which is why these two cases before you tonight are coming. They are the first ones that are triggering the special exception permit process, and so this is the first variety of this case to come in front of you. I mentioned the historic districts. Also, if one of these are being located within one of the historic districts, and we actually adopted a spread of new historic districts on top of all the existing National Register districts for the purposes of regulating these facilities to make sure that we had some control if they're going to be located in the historic areas. But that's not the case for the two this evening. These two happen to be located in single-family zones on brand new poles. And so we did establish, in addition to, as well as essentially all items that come in front of you, there are a spread of findings, so to speak, or things to consider associated with the rezoning. And so these are things that are laid out, for example, in the staff report for the previous case, responses to these particular things that need to be considered when pursuing a rezoning. Well, special exception permits have those as well. And so within each of these two cases this evening, there's the chart in the staff report that covers all those things. But there's one additional one to a standard special exception permit added specifically for these poles. And the finding is basically that the small wireless facility is designed so as not to detract from the residential character of the district. So I'll kind of point you for that particular finding, as it's specific to these types of facilities and your consideration of those cases. And so up on the screen is a map. So we have actually issued a total of 15 permits for small cellular facilities on the right-of-way. And so up on the map is a dot for each of one of those locations. Okay. Very few of them have been constructed. There was a batch of them basically submitted. I think it was in late 2019, right before COVID, and then another batch of it just recently. And so some have been constructed, some will not be constructed, but many of those are facilities that are located on existing utility poles, some within residential areas. There's a couple, for example, if you look at the one labeled 906 Leslie, you'll see one right next to it at 1341 Chestnut. I believe the situation there is they found a better location right next door, and so the other one is not being used. But that, I wanted to show you this map to show you that these are appearing in our community, many of them by right, going through the permit process. But these, the ones that involve a new pole in a single family residential district have to go through the special exception permit process. That's why they're coming to you. But they're certainly being located, throughout the community in order to provide for cellular service for the citizenry and such. I'll mention it's my impression, in dealing with these and in communication that the companies, they have an incentive to locate on existing poles. If they locate a new pole, then they become the owners of that pole. They're responsible for maintenance of that. They have, the utility connections are a little bit easier if done on an existing pole. And then also it's an easier permit process. It's a permit process by right, so to speak, rather than having to go through a special exception permit process with a roughly 3-month timeline. And so I'll mention that to you, that it is my experience that they try to locate on existing poles where possible. It's where it's not possible that they start looking for new poles. And I'd certainly encourage you to ask questions such as that to the representative here this evening, and make sure all your questions are answered on these two specific items. Thank you. I wanted to give that overview prior to Courtney going and focusing on the specific requests. But first, are there any questions that anyone has? Nothing specific to the request, but anything more broad or general with respect to these? Okay. Yes.
Only that if the technology is way obsolete, does the pole just stand, or they have to remove it? Or maybe that was, I don't know what's in the I was just curious, was the pole just left there with nothing?
Luckily, we have a literal expert on cellular facilities located here in the room, our city attorney, and I might have to defer that particular question to him.
That's a good question. Generally, facilities that are not being used and are demonstrated that they won't be used in the future are subject to removal. This is a very complicated area, and to get you a really correct answer, I'd have to do a little bit more research, but the general proposition is that there is a favoritism to not leaving obsolete infrastructure in the rights of way.
Thank you, Eric, for the overview. We'll move on to Courtney to present the case.
So again, this is case number P22003, located at 818 Montana Street, for a small wireless facility special exception permit. It's going to be located near the intersection of Montana Street and Pike Street. They're on that corner identified by a purple star with a arrow pointing to it from the P to just kind of give some clarification on there. It's located within a RS4 single-family residential zone. The surrounding zoning is the same. Uses are the same, single-family residential. And then those are some some site photos just to kind of give an idea and look. of where it's going to be located, and it also points out that there are, so in the analysis of this pole, it looks into, does it align with, or will it detract from the character, the look and feel? Will it basically interfere with the property values, the character of the area? Will it cause any sort of downsides, disadvantages for those people who live there? And I'll show you the, well, you saw the photo first of that pole, and then also you can see that there are other utility poles there. They look very similar, and it will not, well, it's found to be very similar in the look and feel of those utility poles. Let's see. So this is a facility site plan that just again kind of shows an overview and a location of where that pole would be located. This next slide is the elevations, which shows more details, and this is included in your site, or in your, sorry, your case packet, and it kind of goes over the details and the specifics of how those poles are constructed, how you'll note it, like details like the height, the placement of how it's going to be constructed, what equipment is going to be located where, the measurements, the specifications. Like at the top, there's going to be a antenna canister, and the central location is going to have the main box with the equipment, some wiring and connectivity there. But that is those elevations for that in a general sense. I'll let the applicant go into more detail about that. And then, let's see. Nope. Okay. Yeah, I'll give the rest over to the applicant for the further description of the case and what they're proposing, as far as going into, because they want to place that pole within a single-family residential zoning district in the right-of-way. So I'll let them go further into that.
Do any commissioners have any questions for Courtney? Okay, we'll move on to
No, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have him.
Okay.
Yeah, I was getting, sorry, I didn't even scare you.
I thought you were
Not
moving
really
on to the
moving
next
on,
case.
but we're moving on to the gentleman would like to present the case. Speak your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Joe Marcus. I'm St. Louis, Missouri. I work for Black & Veatch. We're an international engineering firm. And AT&T is our client in doing this project in Missouri and Kansas and many other places around the United States. The reasoning for the small cells is two words, essentially: capacity and coverage. So in areas to where there is a lack of coverage, it may be because of terrain, it may be because of many reasons, or capacity, in other words, high usage from people on the street or people in their homes or whatever. That's when they start looking at where the small cells go. And that is a group of RF, we call them RF engineers, that go through and study their maps to see, where those areas are. So when they start going in and looking at where they want to place them, it's rather specific, because the radius of these antennas is only somewhere around 1/4 to 1/2 mile, generally speaking. So every time they move it even a few hundred feet one way or the other, they start defeating their purpose of having them. Generally speaking, we go first for the utility poles and light poles to use, because that's the least expensive route, obviously, and it's the one we start with first. In this particular instance, out of the two we're looking at, I don't remember which one it is, but we already had a permit for one like across the street on a utility pole that's owned by Ameren. And after the permit was issued, it turned out that Ameren came back and said, oh, we messed up, you can't use that pole. I mean, and they've got 1,000 reasons why you can't use their poles. Transformer on the pole, you can't use it. If there are risers going up the sides of the pole, they can't use it then. Let's see. If there are fuses on the pole, you can't use those poles. And the list goes on and on. And so we spent a lot of time on these two in particular, trying to find a place to put them on an existing pole, and it just didn't happen. Show you here. I have an engineer's drawing here. This is actually where it's going on the corner here. And they placed a pole in there. You can see exactly what it's going to look like once they put the pole in with the equipment on.
A rendering that doesn't currently exist. That's
No, that's the proposed one we're going to do.
Right.
At exactly that location.
Got it.
And it's a 34-foot wood utility pole, essentially about the same size and same type of all the other utility poles on the street. Unfortunately, we have to put in a new one. The pole will be owned by AT&T Telephone. The other equipment is owned by AT&T Mobility. I know that's kind of splitting hairs, but they are two separate companies, even if they're owned by the same parent. That's essentially it. I mean, it's fairly simple because it's a utility pole with an antenna on top and a box on the side. We try our best too when we're placing new ones and placing them someplace that's not obtrusive, or we like to look for either corners or property lines, so we stick kind of in the middle to where it's the least obtrusive to whoever is there. So in this particular instance, there is one house, but it faces the other direction. The next two are a little different. So, questions?
Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Okay. Did a good job then.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to just speak on this request? Seeing none. Okay, we'll now close testimony and we'll get a staff report from Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, under the analysis of those findings that are in the staff report in your packet, some of those things, for example, include, we can just go briefly over them, but is this pole in compliance with the proposed pole? Would it, and the equipment and all of its capacity, would it be in compliance with the zoning code, and it's found to be so? Is it in compliance with, or in conformance with the comprehensive plan? And yes, that is so. There's actually a goal that specifically says that the improvement of telecommunication facilities and infrastructure is a desire. And then another part of that analysis was, would it interfere with the uses of those property owners that are actually there? And based off of its operations, its placement, its components, structural components, and things like that, is found to be no or minimal. And then would that use, would it benefit the welfare and the convenience of the public? Most likely so, especially those who do use data, cellular data. And then would it overbear, or would it cause an overbearing of the municipal services? No, not really. And then another portion of that analysis involves, would it interfere with traffic, parking, environmental issues? We looked, as for what we could look into, no. There are other state and federal and other regulations that would overview those. So from what we could tell, no. And then there's, of course, that special analysis that says, is this communication facility, does it detract from the character and overall look and feel of that surrounding zoning designation? No, not really. Again, based off of the placement, structural components, and all of its capacity of how it is proposed to be designed, built, and again, located, it's found to be no. So based off of these various analyses and factors that are a part of the staff report, it is found that we do recommend approval, a motion for approval, a motion for a recommendation of approval to the City Council for a small wireless facility right-of-way special exception use permit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Courtney? Seeing none. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion for recommendation for approval to the City Council of the requested small wireless facility right-of-way special exception permit.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Motion passes. Okay. Courtney, this will be moving on to the same city council meeting as the March 7th, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we're moving on to the next case, which is basically the same thing, different address, I believe. Case number P22004, 917 Jackson Street, small wireless facility right-of-way, special exception permit. We'll ask Courtney to present that case as well.
Okay. So this again is the same thing again, and it's different location like you said, but it's 917 Jackson Street. There in the right of way, it's more centrally. Well, it's not at a corner. Basically, it's more a little bit further along, but it's between two property lines, identified there by a star with the arrow pointing to it. That zoning is a RS4, single-family residential. Those uses are very similar to the last one, where it's single-family residential, and the surrounding uses are very similar as well. The applicant is proposing the same thing. They want to place a new pole there in a single-family residential zoning district. So they're applying for that special exception permit for this in respect to the small wireless facility. These are some photos of the location, just to give an idea of its placement, where it's going to be put, and then showing that there are other utility poles there. And so it would not be something that's very strange or unique to the area. There are a lot of other poles located there. This is another kind of other photos of the area, different angles showing similar poles and things like that, to give an idea of also the feel and the look of the area. And then see, this is the same thing. It's the facility site plan showing where it's going to be located. These are the pole elevations. It's very similar to the last one, with the same height, placement of the equipment, like the canister, the antenna canister, and the box there. Let's see, and it's just very similar to the last one. It's just in a different location. There's nothing really else. I'll go ahead and let the applicant again describe what they're requesting.
Does anybody have any questions for Courtney before we ask the applicant to come up? No? Okay.
Again, for the record, I'm Joe Marcus with Black and Beach in St. Louis, and we represent AT&T. This is a rendering of our engineers of what this is going to look like on this one. Pole here, on an empty lot, as you can see here. So, in this particular instance, let's see here. The pole is going to be 13 and a half feet off the curb onto the right-of-way. It's an unusually large right-of-way there, and it splits the property line between 509 and 503 Roland, which is the street behind it. So if you were to extend the property line all the way up to Jackson Street, it would split it there. So again, this is another 34-foot pole, and wood, really no different than the other. If you have any, questions. Pardon? Well, if we have an empty lot that we can put it in front of, we usually try to do that rather than sticking it, even on a corner, it ends up being close to someone's house, and at least this way it's, you know, less obtrusive if it sits somewhere other than in front of a house, put it that way. And we realize that someday that's a possibility. There could be houses built there, but that's the reason too that we try to put it right on the property line, so it splits between the two lots as opposed to being in front of a front door or something.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Just another quick question for you. So we have the larger cell towers. Those cover a very long distance. And then with these small cells, those are more like kind of pinging off one another. They're meant to work in a smaller distance. Is that correct? To enhance the service in that area. So where you're wanting to put these, I'm assuming there's a service issue and we're trying to enhance the service in that area.
Correct. Either there's an issue with a coverage because of the terrain or something that is not a very strong signal, or it's an issue of there's a lot of usage in that particular area and it's more than what the capacity is off of the larger cell.
And so sometimes too, the decision to put a tower somewhere is kind of based on the research where you've gone out and figured out where you can get the best signal. And so the placement may be because of that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The small cell, the choice of the location for those, it's they call it a heat map. It's a map that the RF engineers put together with a set of software that models all of this, and it takes into account the terrain and the usage and so forth, and it shows them where the deficiencies are, and then they pick those areas in to particularly put the small cells. All of the small cells actually end up going back to a larger tower. They don't operate totally independently, so they go back to the main tower then, and then go out from there.
Thank you. I would assume that because we're so hilly in Jefferson City, we make it challenging.
Yes, there are a lot of, you do make it challenging because of that in Jefferson City. I have some other locations like that too that are quite amazing. So between that and foliage, large trees, you know, the old 100-foot trees, and they wreak havoc with the signal also. So.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Marcus? See none. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who would like to speak in favor of the request? Seeing none. Is anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of the request? Seeing none. Is there anyone else present that would like to just speak on this request?
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
could just address the
Sure.
the written correspondence that we received.
Oh, sure.
And so it is specific to this case. The particular property owner as shown up on the screen. See if I can do this right. So this particular house right here, the property line goes, or the property goes all the way back and fronts onto Jackson Street, and so that is a separate lot up here. It is buildable. But it's owned by this particular homeowner right here, and so that's the source of the written correspondence. And so she had asked several questions. I did my best to answer those questions. I think one of her major concerns, and rightly so, was that she was under the impression that the tower would be located at the midpoint of the lot. And then when I turned and looked at the location, we tried to put together a good visual for property owners. It's very helpful when you open your mail and you've got something really good to look at. And we were off by the dot on the location of the thing by about that far. Well, that put it right in the middle of her frontage, and so she's very concerned, and rightly so. But then when we looked at the engineering drawings, found that they had in fact located it on the property line. And so I was able to send her those drawings and communicate that. As you can see, she had a few more questions, and did my best to answer those as well. Won't weigh in on the content of the thing. I just want to make sure it's been given its due attention. And so, yes.
So this looks a little different from what we have here. So you're saying, because this is showing that it is on, closer to a property line.
It is closer to the property line, and so yeah, the printed version is off just a little bit.
Okay.
And so no, trust what's on the screen. In fact, the drawing that's included here, and I'll see if I can get away with doing this also. The property line between those two lots, between that vacant lot and this property, I can go back to their photo to show you, is shown as a little dashed line right here. And so, and then this is the property frontage, so the property line separating the private property from the right-of-way. And so the tower is proposed to be located right there at, as Mr. Marcus said in his presentation, an extension of that shared property line toward the street. So it is in an ideal location with respect to not being in the middle of a lot. And then going back to the air photo, you can see I pointed at this particular property with its frontage, but then the neighboring property over has a really big backyard, but their house fronts on this other street as well. And so I hope that gives you an idea on some of where that's located. But anyway, I wanted to point that out, that it was a very small error on our map that generated that comment, and I think we addressed that and got the information to the person.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. We'll move on to, does anybody else have any questions? We'll move on. If not, we'll move on to close the testimony, and we'll have Courtney give us a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with this one, again, it's an analysis that's actually drawn from Article 7 as well as Article 5, which deals with, it's a particular special section just for telecommunication facilities. So we looked into, is it consistent with the zoning code and other code, other portions of the code, and it was found to be so. Is it conformant with the comprehensive plan? There was that goal that this one would again fall into, and that it would enhance the desire to increase the number and the quality of telecommunication infrastructure in the community. Would it affect the use of adjacent properties or even those two property lines? Probably not really. Based off where it's going to be located, and from those photos, again, the other utility poles, it would just act very similar in that it would be maintained by the applicant, that pole would, and then the rest would be the property owner's responsibility. But it wouldn't, the minimal impact on the property, the impact on the property would be minimal. And then, let's see, it would benefit we did check and a yes for it would benefit the convenience and welfare of the community, and that it would increase the connectivity in the community, that area. And then, let's see, it would not interfere with parking, traffic, or any other environmental sort of impacts, or at least from what we could tell, no. And then it would not overbear municipal services. With respect to detracting from the community, that area's character, feel, its property values assessment, based off of how it looks, how it affects that property as a whole, those properties as a whole, it was found to be minimal. So with respect to the analysis of the chart there, that review criteria for both a special exception use permit and the telecommunication facility that is drawn from the zoning code, staff recommends approval of a motion for a recommendation for approval to the City Council for that special, is the small wireless facility right-of-way special exception use permit for this location at 917 Jackson Street. And I'll pass it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Courtney. Does anybody have any questions for staff? Okay, would someone like to make a motion of recommendation?
I'll make a motion for recommendation for approval to the City Council of the requested small wireless facility right-of-way special exception permit.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay. This will be moving on to City Council March 7th, 6:15 p.m. Okay. And then we'll move on to
6 o'clock p.m.
Sorry. Is it 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Yep.
you said 6:15. Oh. 6 o'clock p.m. Moving on to other business, staff updates on prior cases. We'll turn that over to Eric.
So I think the only one I have to report on is the mural code amendment that was heard in December, and so that particular amendment to Chapter 3, the Advertising Sign Code, proceeded on to the City Council. The City Council members had a number of questions, a wide variety of questions on murals and specific murals in particular, and actually remanded that down to the Public Works and Planning Committee, one of the standing council committees, for further discussion. And so that meeting actually took place this morning at 7:30 a.m. And so some of us have been here since then. But the committee is holding it over for discussion, further discussion until next month. And so that's where that particular item stands. The other two items that I presented on at the December meeting, overview of staff efforts for exploring a downtown overlay zoning district, and then also amendments to the subdivision code to make some of the minor plats a little bit easier in terms of administrative processing, perhaps. Basically have nothing to report in terms of progress on those. I think I reported at the time that they would be longer projects. In particular, the downtown overlay district, it's something that really intend to be more educational at first, to see if the downtown property owners and the public are really favorable for that type of concept, and to educate them as to what it consists of and such. And so still intend to proceed with that, but just have no action yet to report. And so that's where we stand. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for your long hours. I appreciate it. Congratulations on your first meeting, Candace. And that's it. I call this meeting adjourned.